In Deltarune, Ralsei is our guide, the Prince of Darkness who knows the prophecy, the rules, and our names before we even introduce ourselves. Which, by the way, led more than a few people to think, at least in the early chapters, that he might have an evil personality or something like that. But today, we're not going to debate whether he's trustworthy, because the latest chapters have shown that, at the very least, he wants what's best for his friends. But they also taught us how his knowledge of the prophecy has led him to see himself and other Darkners as disposable, almost soulless objects, leaving him with a deep-seated fear of being useless, just as he conveys to Tenna before the roaring night cuts off his arms. Poor Tenna. And so today, we're going to analyze Ralsei to show you why, for me, not counting death theories, he is by far the most tragic character in all of Deltarune. Have you ever thought about how hard it must be to live knowing a large part of what the future holds? As if destiny were written in stone, an inevitable truth. If you add to that having your existence reduced to that of a simple tool or object, well, I wouldn't be surprised if Ralsei had functional depression. We've seen Ralsei act like he knows something the others don't countless times, while simultaneously relegating himself to the background as a mere object, a simple tool, or someone who can do little more than obey or heal. It's clear that far from being a mere narrative convenience, his role as a hero of prophecy is completely overshadowed by the burden of knowing things he never wished to know. On many occasions, we see Susie and Kris having fun, as if the Dark Worlds were an escape for them. Board games, the internet, television, they find ways to enjoy themselves. And Ralsei, though he has moments of genuine fun, only does so until he remembers his reality. The point is, Ralsei is a far more complex character than he appears. We know absolutely nothing about his origin, leading to speculation that he might be Kris's horned headband, a possession of Azriel's, or an externalization of Kris's imposter syndrome. We might have a clearer picture of his past if only Jackenstein had finished his story, or if Caddy had actually read the prophecy, instead of just paraphrasing what she thought it meant. But since that's not the case, let's set aside what we don't know, and delve into what we do. And that is, Ralsei seemingly knows everything. He knows how the Dark Worlds work. He knows he can't physically go to the Light World because his existence there is that of a simple object. He knows what the outside world is like, or at least has an idea, and he also knows about the prophecy. This isn't some obscure tale, it's part of a religion in Hometown where heroes make a sacrifice to save the worlds. When we first meet him, he already knew Kris's and Susie's names, as if he'd been waiting for them from the moment he became aware of his world. At first, he takes the initiative as a guide, as the only person who knows what must be done. It's curious that Ralsei knows so much, yet consciously chooses not to divulge that information for reasons that are rarely explained to us. It's highly probable he even knows about Kris and the player as completely separate entities, thanks to the prophecy stained glass window that describes the first hero as the cage with human soul and parts, and the manual he gives us at the beginning of chapter 1, which is only accessible through the game's files. Even more mysterious is Ralsei's ability to control, or at least guide, what we see, often with just a little persuasion. In chapter 1, he has us imagine Susie in the Card Castle's dungeon. In chapter 2, he makes us see Susie in Noelle's room in the Queen's palace. In chapter 3, he does the same with Susie and Tenna's dialogue before the games resume. And in chapter 4, he initially directs our attention to Susie talking with Gerson, though we can choose to imagine other characters like the Knight and the Well, with curious interactions in each case. The question has always been why he diverts our attention away from the main scene. In chapter 1, it seemed like a simple meta-narrative device to keep the story moving. It wasn't until chapter 2 that it became a real question, as we saw that Kris and Ralsei were apparently having a conversation behind the scenes. The same thing happens again in chapter 3. What's strange is that in chapter 4, it feels less like a suggestion and more like an excuse Ralsei uses to leave the scene and then return. This subtle detail got me thinking. While your favorite theory YouTuber might say he wanted to talk to Gaster or use the time to speak with Kris without the soul or the player present, I think the answer in chapter 4 is simpler. He just wanted to keep researching the prophecy now that he had the chance, to see if he could uncover a hidden truth. a truth behind the truth. But while we're on the mystery surrounding Ralsei, why not start questioning his versions of the prophecy? Besides the chapter 1 version, which is more of an excuse to seal dark fountains and barely mentions the Titans, the Roaring, or the Angel's Heaven without concrete explanation, there's the version revealed near the end of chapter 2 after the fight against Giga Queen. When Ralsei stops Burtley from creating his own perfect world, he no longer recites the optimistic story he used to convince Kris and Susie. Instead, he warns that the Titans will rise from the dark fountains and engulf the land in devastation. This omission led many people to believe, and some still do, that Ralsei could be evil. After all, who can trust someone who hides crucial information even from their closest friends? Furthermore, Ralsei is far from perfect. He can be intrusive and is very by the book, following instructions and rules as if his life depends on it. But he doesn't lead. He knows things, but when it comes to the crucial moment of making a decision, he's incapable of it. We see this when he leads the fight against the Titan. As it begins to regenerate, he loses hope and simply freezes in fear. He freezes because he no longer knows what to say. He knows so much, has read so much, and has carried so much that he can no longer distinguish between protecting and manipulating. He drowns in the attempt to make everything turn out right. It's in the moments when he breaks down, when he shows his fragility and insecurities, that we begin to see the real Ralsei. When he refers to himself and other Darkners as mere objects in the real world at the start of chapter 3, when he tells Tenna that everyone is replaceable and not to worry about it, when he confronts Susie in chapter 4 about what he truly knows and the final tragedy of the last prophecy, and his smile fades. That's when we see Ralsei as more than just the cute one or the kind one, more than the guide or the traitor. We see him as someone complex, full of good intentions, twisted by fear and the anguish of failing in his only role, to be needed by others. Did you ever wonder what truly hurts Ralsei? Perhaps it's not being able to be with his friends in the light world, not being useful to them beyond the confines of his small castle in the school closet, and it's being a witness to a destiny and a reality that are completely beyond his ability to change. Deep down, Ralsei doesn't just want to save the world, he wants to have a place in it. A place where his destiny, though imposed upon him, gives his existence meaning. Chapter 2, Good Boy. Beneath Ralsei's sweet smile lie dark themes like emotional self-effacement, the fear of being unnecessary, and the existential dread of living in a world where destiny is already written and sealed, and you are nothing more than a mere tool. Because, unlike other characters such as Lancer, Shorm, or Queen, Ralsei is the only one who seems to understand that he isn't real. Or at least, he is the only one who is pained by it. This isn't just in what Ralsei says or how he says it. At the beginning of chapter 3, he explains that everything in the dark world is nothing more than an illusion, one born from the absolute absence of light. According to him, even his own existence is an illusion, as if everything he feels, touches, or remembers lacks substance or essence. Darkners are a fiction projected by the darkness, and that includes him. As absurd as it sounds, Ralsei believes he doesn't truly exist, not like Kris and Susie do. But he doesn't fight the idea or look for a way out. He resigns himself to it. He accepts it, as if explaining why it shouldn't hurt too much if he disappears. When he asks Susie to find real friends if he and the others are ever not enough for her, he's preparing everyone for his own non-existence, just as he has done since he first became self-aware. And truth be told, all of this is deeply reflected in his role as a hero of the prophecy. He was born with a single purpose: to guide the heroes. Along the way, he decided to also protect them from the prophecy itself. Ralsei's role as a hero isn't linear at all. It's full of stumbles and is sometimes contradictory and self-indulgent. He himself admits that he initially tried to change how the prophecy's events would unfold, hoping that by being kinder, he could alter the tragic outcome of the legend. This led him to be harsh with Susie, who hadn't shown any empathy for a Darkner up to that point in chapter 1. But when he saw it was a futile effort, he stopped fighting the destiny he wanted to change, as if his optimism had vanished in the face of the inevitable truth he knew from the start. And even so, even if being kind was just an excuse to avoid a grim fate, he never stops being kind. He never stops offering to heal the bad guys, never stops giving compliments, and is always helpful even to those who don't need his help. He doesn't abandon his role as a hero because it's the only thing that still gives his existence purpose. In chapter 2, he asserts himself again by preventing Burtley from bringing a Titan to life by creating a new dark fountain. And beyond being kind, good-natured, and firm when the situation demands it, he also shows himself to be fragile. Because let's be honest, Ralsei's story has shown us flaws we can't ignore. He was not only firm and somewhat rude to Susie, partly because he deemed it necessary, but he also underestimated her abilities. He pigeonholed each of his friends into archetypes meant only to fulfill a role in the prophecy, something he admits a couple of times when he reveals he thought making friends would be more complicated. It's as if he only understands relationships and people as concepts, completely forgetting the essence that defines them, even stripping Darkners of their value because from a Lightner's perspective, they are nothing more than disposable objects. Susie, in contrast, ignored all this knowledge from the start and refused to let the metaphysics of the dark world break the bonds she had formed. It's as if every life, even that of seemingly inanimate objects, truly mattered to her. Ralsei doesn't lead because he believes that role has already been assigned to Kris and the player. This is made very clear both at the entrance to Cyber City and in Tenna's video game. When he can move freely, even if it's just in a game, he finally feels free from the imaginary chains that strip him of the feeling of being alive and existing. He's the only character who would read the game manual before playing. In fact, he does, which is how he discovers he can turn to stone in Tenna's game. But this obsession with being perfect for others and fulfilling the role he was born for comes at a cost, because deep down, Ralsei struggles to see himself as an individual. He doesn't conceive of himself as a person with desires, flaws, or contradictions, only as a useful tool. A stone, a stool, a servant who always waits with a smile to make sure you're okay. And when you think about it, it's incredibly sad. His completely empty room not only reflects this clearly, but also tells us a lot about his personality. He bakes and knits not because he wants to or enjoys it, at least not initially, but because he wants to be useful to others and receive their affection. In the same way, he has deprived himself of hobbies, his own thoughts, and even memories. When asked about the Ralsei plushie we give him in Chapter 2, he calls it a simple, selfish desire. Another scene that clearly demonstrates this is during the Acid River ride in Queen's Mansion, when Ralsei tells Kris that he likes Susie just the way she is, despite everything. Then, in a quiet voice, he wonders what it would be like to simply be Ralsei. It's heartbreaking because even he doesn't know what that means. He has so deeply internalized his support role that he feels guilty whenever he worries about something personal. This stands in stark contrast to when we finally reach Chapter 3 and see Ralsei in a new light. Specifically, there's a scene that only occurs if Kris steps away to find the Shadow Mantle, leaving Susie and Ralsei in the green room. For a brief moment, we see him smiling, playing video games, just being himself. For a fleeting instant, there's no destiny, no prophecy, no dark fountains, just Ralsei, like a kid in a room with a game console, happy and without a care in the world. And right there, Susie's words reveal that even in a video game, he's incapable of harming his enemies. And if carrying the absolute weight of feeling insufficient, non-existent, and indecisive, and still choosing to do the right thing doesn't make you a hero, I honestly don't know what does. But it makes you wonder, is Ralsei truly happy? Or does he just seem that way because he knows others need him to be? Because if he has shown anything throughout the story, it's that he forces himself to be okay, even when he's breaking inside. Ralsei might be someone who smiles because it's what others expect of him. Someone who avoids conflict, not just out of kindness, but because he believes his worth depends on keeping everyone else happy. And yet, the best part of his character comes from his goodness, because even when no one is watching, he chooses peace. His kindness is a conscious choice, despite all the pain he carries, and that, in a world that seems perpetually on the brink of collapse, is a form of strength that very few truly understand. And with all that said, I think we can finally return to the prophecy, the deepest and most tragic part of Ralsei's character. Chapter 3, Prophecy. The legend Ralsei tells us at the beginning of Chapter 3 is incredibly incomplete. As the chapters progress, we realize the prophecy isn't as abstract as it seemed. In reality, it's specific, precise, and so detailed it's terrifying. This is reflected in the stained glass windows of the prophecy in Chapter 4. The human is no longer just a human, but a cage with human parts. The Queen's chariot, Jockington's beard, Tenna being shattered by the night. It shows that every truth in the prophecy has pinpoint accuracy, seemingly impossible to change. The contrast with Gerson is stark. According to him, believing that everything is already written is absurd, but Ralsei has internalized this truth so deeply that he has become what the prophecy wants him to be, the prince alone in deepest dark. Ralsei's character arc is complex and distant from the others, as if his personality was built from the start to be unchangeable, inherent to his very existence. It's almost as if, even if he wanted to change what the prophecy says, he refuses to believe in even the slightest possibility of a different ending, because deep down, he has already accepted every truth that has been revealed to him. If he knows with certainty how both worlds work, what reason does he have to doubt the prophecy, since both pieces of knowledge come from the same source? We can't say for sure what the tragedy of the final prophecy is, perhaps a loss, a sacrifice, a betrayal. Trying to decipher it would likely be a wild guess, though in the videos I solved the weird route and how it ends, and the Deltarune ending theory that connects everything, I think I got pretty close, but that's a topic for another time in case you haven't seen them. The point is, it must be truly tragic for Ralsei to have tried so hard to keep it from the others, not just to prevent them from giving up on their mission to save both worlds, but to protect them, because he knew what it was like to live day in and day out with that truth. And yes, he's the only one with the knowledge to possibly change it. Yes, he's the only one who can tell the others, but he was also the only one, up to that point, who understood how terrible they would feel if they knew. Because if the prophecy is even half as tragic as we imagine, how could you possibly prepare yourself to see your fate sealed by a force you can't control? Ralsei is the kind of character who can't be overlooked for the wrong reasons. It's easy to pigeonhole him as the support or the nice guy who's always smiling, but behind all that is someone carrying an enormous fear he's kept silent since he can remember. And yet, despite all of it, Ralsei keeps going, smiling, healing those who hurt him, dreaming of an ending where everyone else is happy, even if he's not there. Not out of obligation, but because he has decided that if this is his destiny, then he will give it meaning. And that isn't submission, it's courage. Because Ralsei doesn't represent weakness, or cowardice, or passivity. He represents how difficult it is to live with a prophecy that hurts you, with a future that denies you, and still choose love. And that makes him one of the most human characters Deltarune has to offer. So if you, like him, have ever felt like you don't matter, that you can't show what you feel, or that just being you isn't enough, then in some dark corner of your heart, you might be more like Ralsei than you think. But just like him, maybe it's only a matter of time before you realize you're so much more than that.